Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 791. My opponent started off with e4 and I went with d5, the Scandinavian defense. So he took, which is a normal move, and I played knight f6, the martial defense it's called sometimes, to the Scandinavian. He goes d4. I go knight takes d4. So these are all the main moves. Notice that it doesn't really pay to hold on to the pawn with c4. This bishop b5 check is an interesting move. I think I've looked at that recently, but this is really the main move. And after this point, at this point, black really has two choices. One is bishop g4, which I played here, and the other main choice, I guess we can add bishop f5 as another idea, just with the light squared bishop. The other idea is to play g6 and develop the dark squared bishop here and leave the light squared bishop for later. The thing is, after g6 it gets a little bit crowded. That takes away one of the light squares and the bishop can get trapped over here, so you don't generally play bishop g4 and g6 together unless you intend to trade that bishop off. So it's kind of a place where you have to make that choice, whether you want to play with the fianchetto or play with bishop g4. And I've played both systems, I've been playing the fianchetto system more recently, most often recently, but this time I decided to go back to the bishop g4 line. So he went bishop e2, and I went e6. It looks like knight c6 is a main move. I was kind of missing this knight c6 idea. I didn't really want to block the c-pawn, but yeah, once again, it also appears here that knight c6 is a good move. The move I played, bishop d6, it turns out that's not too bad if you take the chess engine point of view with it. It rated it comparable to these other moves. In general, the chess engine prefers white quite a bit. In the Scandinavian defense, white has more space and better development. So what black has is usually a pretty solid position. So nothing really, I think, goes wrong, even though the chess engine is giving a big edge to white at this point. So anyway, I went with bishop d6, which is a novelty, but we can look at the main line here, bishop e7. Yeah, I looked at that for a little bit. Knight e5, I just wanted to learn a little bit about how it's typically played. And it looks like they go for the exchange. You know, when the light bishop is out here, and when the light squared bishop is out here, and white is unpinned with the bishop on e2. Often that's an idea, just to trade that off whenever the knight moves. This is a good bishop in this structure. He's got a pawn on a dark square in the center, so this is his theoretically bad bishop, the dark squared one. So this is a decent trade for black. Let's see, queen takes e2, castles, and well, c4 or rook d1. Yeah, and the game continues from here. Yeah, I didn't look at this too much. Just after c4, the knight goes back to f6. And so that's how the main line goes. Looks like I said, the chess engine prefers white in these positions. You can see white has more space, but black has managed to get safely castled and has got a couple pieces developed. Just needs to develop the dark squared knight, the queen's knight, and well, white has a couple pieces that white needs to develop as well. So nothing too bad here. Let's see, in this position I played bishop d6 rather than bishop e7. I thought it was kind of an interesting alternative, setting up for some kind of kingside attack. I was sort of forgetting about this c4 move, though, and because cancel that. Because c4 kicks the knight immediately, and after the knight goes back, when he pins the knight, there's a good chance he'll probably want to move that bishop back to e7 anyway. So I suppose bishop d6 may turn out to be a waste of time in some lines. Oh, but there wasn't one interesting idea here I didn't think about. Let's go back. Yeah, right here. The chess engine points out that the knight could also go to the f4 square. It didn't have to go to f6. The bishop is supporting it there. And, well, a knight on that square makes a good impression. It's hitting the light squared bishop, and it basically wins the bishop pair for black. So I think that's the best move here. This bishop, the light squared bishop, has nowhere to go to that would escape the view of this knight. So it forces a trade. I think the chess engine recommended trading off the dark squared bishop for the knight. But anyway, I mean, black has the option of forcing a trade. So one way or the other, either with white taking the knight or with the knight taking the light squared bishop, in either case, black ends up with the bishop pair. So Anyway, knight f4 is an interesting move here. I played knight f6. He went bishop g5, pinning it immediately. And this is what I was saying. So a lot of times maybe I'm starting to think that the bishop might be better placed on e7. But I wasn't ready to concede that just yet. I was going to keep the bishop on d6 for a while. It's a good active square looking at the h2 pawn. So we'll see if it becomes necessary later. And then right here, you know, the chess engine has been giving a big edge to white all along, but right here after the bishop retreat, it suddenly starts to think that things aren't so bad. It would play like this. The chess engine likes to take here, wants to take here, and then after queen takes f6, play queen b3. And I just wanted to show this idea because it is an important idea. When the light squared bishop leaves the queen side and comes out over here on the king side, which I made that decision pretty early on, it leaves the queen side, in particular the b7 pawn, undefended. So the queen side's a little bit weaker, and so the white can develop his queen out to the queen side here and take advantage of the fact that I've placed my bishop over on the other side of the board. Now, it's not like this wins any material, but the chess engine thinks this is the way for white to maintain the biggest advantage. After the normal retreat, which is sort of what I was expecting too, thinks that black is okay here. So let's see, I castled, went knight c3, went a6. Yeah, once again, the knight c6 idea is preferred here. So let's show the best line from this point according to the chess engine. We'll go knight c6, d5, and then this exchange, and then bishop takes f3. A nice little intermediate move, taking the knight and preparing to take back the pawn if pawn takes knight is played over here. So bishop takes is the move, and then the knight can come into the c5 square without getting traded. So in this position, white has the bishop pair. So white got the bishop pair on this line, but white also has an isolated pawn, which may become a weakness later. And white also has more space. So strengths and weaknesses, white still has some slight advantage, but black has some interesting play here as well with the knights attacking the bishops and this pawn becoming weak later potentially. Okay, so that's just the other way to play it with knight c6. I played with a6, keeping his knight out of b5 so as to maintain this bishop on the square. Of course, he can play c5 at any time and kick my bishop back, so that's always something to be aware of. I have to make sure that there's always a square for the bishop to go to. He went knight e4 at this point. What's the best play? The chess engine gives this line, knight e5, and after that the exchange, bishop takes, queen takes, and then just retreating the bishop back to e7. So the chess engine really does want to bring the bishop back here just to unpin. And I guess at this point it starts to make some sense to me as well. And let's see, neither side in this line ends up with the bishop pair, but white has the edge in development and the edge in space. So good position for white there after I played that a6 move. Anyway, he didn't go knight e5, he went knight e4. And once again, I dropped my bishop back to e7. I didn't want to trade it for that knight particularly. And he went for some trades. And so this, and then he decided to retreat the bishop. This is where he started burning up a lot of time. This position is probably about even, so there's no big advantage after those trades to white anymore. And this lack of time is going to be a problem for white in the long run. But the game itself is still, a pretty even game. Let's see. I went knight d7 here, getting my last piece developed. He brought his knight into e5, traded off my light squared bishop, or white's light squared bishop as well, getting rid of that good piece. But he's turned his dark squared bishop into a good piece. It's on a good diagonal, always poking at that c7 square. I have to keep an eye on. And here's where I went c5. So I like to kind of liberate my position with a move like c5 when I get the chance and undermine the center. But perhaps this was not the best time for it. In a slow game, when you have time to really think, a move like this should always be on your radar. Is this a good time to try and bust up the center or not? And you should try and calculate his head as much as you can to try and figure out if this is the best time for that, or if there's some moves you need to prepare it, or if you need to play it now, or if, in order to, if your opponent is going to prevent it given an extra move. So sometimes that's why it's better to play these moves earlier than later, because you give your opponent too much time, he can maybe just stop you from breaking out altogether. But here it seems that perhaps it's a little premature, and we'll see why in a few moves. Let's see. Instead of c5, I could have just traded here. I didn't like this, but the chess engine says actually this is the best way to play. I mean, it looks like I'm getting pushed around. He's got this advanced pawn, although it is blocking his bishop out, so his bishop is not very active. It's just sitting there defending the pawn, but I don't have a whole lot of space here either. Yeah, hard to evaluate. I don't particularly like this position for black, but the chess engine says that's the best play there. Let's see. But c5 here, instead of taking right away, which he did, he could have thrown in rook a to d1. And I had a feeling there might be something here, but I didn't see anything directly. But, let's see. The line is rook a to d1. That's how the chess engine was playing it. And then, I was just going to take the pawn here. He can take back, and now this is a bit awkward. This is what maybe I didn't calculate entirely correctly. He's got two pieces piled up on the knight, and it can't move immediately because it's pinned. But I can unpin, and interestingly enough, however he takes the knight, I'll be able to get something out. So if he takes with the rook, I'll take the knight, and if he takes with the knight, I'll take the rook. He can take a rook, but basically it comes out materially even, at least in terms of the pieces. So, but the chess engine found a way to win a pawn here by taking with the rook. I take here, take his knight, and then he can grab the b pawn. And not only does he grab this pawn, but he also defends this pawn, which is under fire. And so, well, it's my turn. I mean, my bishop's hanging, so I have a move to defend it. So I have the same number of pieces as white, but white just snagged an extra pawn. So that would have been best play there, and that's why c5 was not really correct to play it right at that moment. So I probably should have looked for a different move. But anyway, I played c5, and he, instead of throwing in that rook move, he took first. And, well, this gives me time to get my knight out of that potential pin by taking. Now he plays rook a d1. And I went queen to e7 here. I should actually have moved the queen over to b6. That's a better square for the queen and less likely to run into trouble. But there is a specific tactic that white has right here, and it's not so easy to see, but it's worth looking for. And it's a tactical sequence that results in my position being worse. It doesn't actually result in a win of material, but anyway, if you want to see if you can spot the idea here, there's all kinds of things going on here, and so that's why I had kind of the feeling there was maybe some potential problems. I was mainly worried about this pawn coming forward and hitting this pawn and maybe opening up the e-file where my queen is undefended. But actually, the queen, that was why I was happy to trade off that d-pawn, and I was starting to think I was a little bit safer here, but there's still a tactic in this position. So anyway, pause the video now if you want some time to think about it. Okay, I'm going to give the answer away. It is the surprising move, at least it surprised me when I saw it, knight to g6. Of course, this is a fork of the queen and the rook, so I probably don't want to give up material, so I take the knight. And then this is the trick. That knight move has unveiled the bishop along this diagonal, so that kind of sleeping bishop on g3 comes to life, defended by the rook. So the advantages of owning the d-file and that bishop have combined, and now he's got this skewer going here against my queen. I think queen f7 was the best move, and now bishop takes knight. He's just a piece up, and now I should move my rook, rook f to d8, something like that. So that's the tactic, and a pretty interesting one, I thought. So well, let's take a look at that final position. I guess I should point out he did not win material, but my pawns in front of my king have been messed up. This doubled pawn here, this weak e pawn is going to be a long-term problem. and so I don't know how long it'll be before he manages to round that up. Anyway, I mean, it's not like it's game over, but definitely leads to an advantage for white. So that was after, yeah, that was in this position after I played queen e7. So, yeah, pretty interesting. I guess the key idea is moving the knight with tempo so that the bishop can come and fork the queen and the knight. Also, there's nowhere the queen can go to defend that knight. And that's even a bigger threat than the skewer of queen against rook. Anyway, he missed that idea, or he thought this was better. He played b4, kicking my knight. The knight hopped over to a4, went queen c2, and hitting my knight, and I played b5, holding on to it. And now he should really just play c5. If he plays c5 here, I don't know why. That would be almost an automatic move for me. There's another place where he was starting to spend a lot of time thinking, or maybe he had already spent a lot of time and he was starting to move quickly at this point. But to talk about the c5 move, the main reason I like this move for white is that it's a protected passed pawn, which is just it's like an ace in the hole. It's a resource you've got for the end game, so you've always got this advantage to look forward to if the pieces come off and you end up in an end game. Secondly, it controls squares on my side of the board, so he's controlling the d6 square with the pawn and the d7 square with his knight, and he's got the rook on this file, so it's coordinating very well with his other pieces. So I think playing that c5 move is pretty straightforward. I certainly would have gone for that without too much thought. Let's see. He went, knight to d7. He hopped the knight in here, hitting my rook, so it's a move with tempo. Bring my rook over to attack his knight, and then he trades off my bishop. So I guess that was his idea. He wanted to get rid of my dark squared bishop, which was a good piece. And it's taking away these squares from my knight in a way, right? My bishop was defending those squares, so my knight could always hop into c3 or b2. So maybe that's what he was concerned about. But at this point, yeah, he was definitely low on time at this point. He traded here, and then he traded on b5. And here, once again, he should just push that pawn rather than trading. And after these trades, somewhat surprisingly, black is just better. So they say an endgame where you have pawns on both sides of the board is good for the side with the bishop. But I guess we're not quite in an endgame yet. The queens are still on. And now my knight is going to get active. And I have one pawn holding back two pawns. Sometimes that can be an advantageous situation for the endgame as well. Anyway, the chess engine rates black as better in this position. Let's see. It's white's turn. He went to queen c7. Okay, he invaded with his queen. I played queen to d4, protecting my rook. My rook was already protected, but I didn't want to run into difficulties on this diagonal, and I wanted to get my queen more active. Let's see, played queen c6, which hits my loose pawn. I played knight to c3 here, defending my pawn and attacking his pawn. And then he played h3 here. Maybe he's starting to worry about some safety issues with his king. He needs to play that to give his king some lift there. He wasn't particularly worried about the knight check, or he didn't see it. But but the main thing here is I'm just winning a pawn. He went h3, went ahead and took the a pawn. The chess engine says it's better to play queen takes b4, and now I have to agree. I can hold on to this pawn with the knight and the queen, and I wasn't sure if my knight might come under fire, but I guess when the knight moves, I've still got the queen defending that pawn. The knight's controlling the b square, so the knight's, well, actually the queen and the knight are both looking at b1, so the rook's not coming over here to b1 to harass the queen. So that's the strongest way to play this, but this also wins a pawn. He played, and then I played here, just going directly for the end game, offering the queen trade. But this is where he ran out of time, so he spent a little bit too much time at the wrong moments. And even if you have that 4-second increment, it's easy to run out of time if you're in a complicated end game, or if there's any decision you need to make which has far-reaching consequences. It's easy to run out of time. So that's how it ended. But at this point, I had a slight edge. But he missed his chance earlier, so he had that. First of all, well, there was that tactic, in the center, and then there was pushing his pawn forward with c5. Those are his two chances to really get a pretty significant edge here. So interesting game. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you again soon. Bye.